Okay, so before we get into the mechanics of bones, it's important to know the types of the bones in the body and how we can classify them. So quickly, over here. The bones in the body can be broken down into two parts. The axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. This picture here shows the two differences, the pink here being the axial skeleton and the blue over here being the appendicular skeleton. And the basic difference is more so what it performs than the difference being what it's made up of. So quickly, let me just talk about the anatomy of the axial skeleton. It includes the skull, the vertebral column, and the rib cage. And as you can see that these bones provide more of support and protection for the organs in the vital organs in these parts of the body than the other appendicular skeleton, which tend to provide support and aid in manipulating the environment. So we can clearly see here that the mechanical properties would be different because these bones would need to transfer forces across them, whereas these ones would try to absorb forces that are placed on them from the surrounding environment. Okay, so quickly, types of bones. Bones can be classified into four types: long bones, short bones, irregular bones, and the skeletal bones. Okay, so long bones are bones that have one dimension much longer than another. So usually we'd say the length of the bone is much longer than the width of the bone. And almost all limb bones are made up of long bones. Because, as we're going to see when we talk about long bones, they have this property of the ability of transferring the load from one end to another end very efficiently due to its shape and structure. More on the long bone, we can see it's made up of two parts. There's a really long end that's over here, usually cylindrical, and there's this a little bit, bulged out end over here, and this is typically what most long bones are made up of. And in the future videos, I'll explain what the reason of this is and what these are made up of. But for now, that's all we really need to know. Short bones. Short bones can be categorized into two types. There are those that are roughly cube-shaped, and you can find them in the wrist and the ankle. And we can say in this case, the dimensions of the two sides are slightly similar, so we'd say it's not a long bone. And by the way, let me just go back to the long bone. The long bone doesn't necessarily have to be long. It just needs to have one dimension much longer than another. That's basically the only rule. It doesn't physically have to be long when you compare it to other bones. Back to short bones. The first one is basically cube-shaped. Those are short bones. And the second are bones that are not long but not short. And we would just categorize them as short bones. And these are the bones of the hand and the foot. They're between short and long. Then we have the irregular bones. Irregular bones are not of the other previous two categories, in that they are flat and thin and usually curved. And we're going to see the reason why usually curved plays a role here. Mainly because the flat and thin bones are used for protection instead of being load transfers. And we would see that because they're flat and thin, the only way they really can the only way they can really absorb a lot of force is if they are curved due to the geometry of the shape. And that's the first class of irregular bones. The second class is the unusual shaped ones, which do not have, literally, they don't have a shape. And they're just, random in shape. And lastly, we have the skeleton. It's classified as the skeletal bone. And that basically goes back to how we originally classified the two bones as axial and appendicular. Because I explained it then, I'm not going to explain it now, except that we're going to focus more on the spinal cord. Okay, so we have over here. We have over here the spinal cord over here. I roughly drew it, and there would be 33 individual discs. We call them vertebrae. The first 7 are the cerebral discs, and then would be from the 8 to 19 would be the thorax, and then would be the lumbar spine, the sacrum, and finally the coccyx. And yeah, so these are the 4 parts, the 4 types of bones, and this will help us when we talk more on the mechanics of bone and how each of these bones perform a separate function.